Good evening. He should never have been allowed to work as a vicar. Those are the words of a victim of sexual abuse within the church who's spoken exclusively to BBC South East today in the hope that child protection will be taken more seriously. Mark, we're not using his full name to protect his identity, believes that his abuser was part of a paedophile ring of priests.
He says that he was repeatedly sexually assaulted by the now deceased vicar Roy Cotton. Now, last week we revealed that Cotton was allowed to work at East Sussex churches after he'd received a conviction for child abuse in the 1950s. Our Home Affairs correspondent Colin Campbell has the story.
He suffered in silence for over 20 years. Mark says he was just 13 years old when Vicar Roy Cotton started to abuse him. A priest who senior clergy accept should never have been allowed to work within the church.
He was a horrible man. He was a devious man. He was very clever. He was manipulative to the extreme. I mean, I was scared. I was very scared, and I wanted to run away. I suppose there was a big part of me that wanted to run away, but I felt trapped. You know, as I said, there was no one that I could turn to. I felt there was no one I could turn. No one that would believe me, it was like being in a bubble. And not being able to escape. It was extremely frightening.
A week ago, we exclusively revealed that deceased vicar Roy Cotton, who served at St Andrews in Eastbourne in the 70s and 80s, was a priest who was convicted of abusing a choir boy in 1954. Despite this conviction, he was allowed to be ordained. He'd
been convicted already, and he would never have gone on and done what he did to me and many others. He should never have been in that position. He should never have been able to work with children ever again, or anywhere near them, you know. And it does make me very angry.
Mark says that he was abused by Roy Cotton in the late 70s. He says that it happened mostly here at the vicarage next to St Andrew's Church in Eastbourne. He says that the abuse lasted for around a year.
He would sit me on his lap. And one particular time he showed me slides, and obviously abused me while he was doing that. I did some gardening work for him, and he would bring me in for tea and biscuits, but obviously it wasn't just tea and biscuits.
But how many more victims are there? Cotton took scores of children from Eastbourne on camping trips and overseas. Mark went to France with him and is convinced other priests were involved.
One time in France, we were actually taken to have our photos taken by another vicar, and they weren't ordinary photos. They weren't your everyday snapshots or portraits.
The Diocese of Chichester said today it gives the protection of children the highest priority and takes seriously all concerns raised. They also told us that if anyone has any concerns about safeguarding issues, to contact them.
It has ruined my life. It has had an effect on my life, and it's had an effect on people around me too. And I don't want that to happen to somebody else.
Well, that report was from Colin Campbell, and he's with me now in the studio. And Colin, I understand that you actually have evidence that victims' needs are still not being properly addressed.
That's right, Polly. I've got hold of this document. It's written by the Diocese of Chichester's safeguarding officer. Now, within this document, she says that victims of sexual abuse within the church do not always find the church a safe or a listening community. She also says that work needs to be done to encourage a culture within the diocese which allows victims to tell their stories. She goes on to say that there's inevitably going to be financial implications for the church with this, and she says that until this happens, victims of abuse within the church will continue to suffer in silence.
OK, Colin, thanks.